Good morning, Penelope.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody on this beautiful day that yeah, kind of has a lovely feel to it, right? Like Christmas has come early, thanks to Thanksgiving. And even if you don't really get into the festivities of it all, it feels good. And what feels even better is to be here giving yourself such a powerful declaration to put yourself first and spend some time around your well-being. And Amanda and I have a lot to share with you. We also have a surprise at the
Oh
end.
yeah, we
Because
have a surprise.
in the preparation for this, we realized it was a surprise. And those of you that are into gamifying, I'd like you to try and spot between now and the end, which we will finish on time in an hour. And then Amanda and I will stay and be available for anybody who wants to stay on and chat a bit or ask some questions. We are going to visit 3 destinations. They're talking about time zones. They cross almost the entire globe. So try and see if you can pick up the 3 destinations. Also, if you're able to, please use the chat. So, leave comments, ask questions. When I'm chatting, Amanda will keep her eye on it. When she's chatting, I'll do the same. It's a way to help us really feel like we are in the same room together. So even though, you can't just put up your hand or ask a question, you've got the chat. And that's all. And it's good to help you stay engaged. Because if you're like me, your mind can drift and you can open something else on your iPad or your laptop and then get distracted just at the moment where you could have caught something. So welcome. Maybe you could ask yourself, how could I get even just 1% more comfortable? I don't know what that might mean. Taking a deep breath, sitting back, sighing, looking up, closing a tab, but allow yourself to arrive. Because when you arrive in your body, we've already discussed in some of our previous masterclasses, because this is the third masterclass in a series, which is why I'm not going to go into Amanda's bio and my bio, because it's all there. It kind of feels like a lot of you are family. And if we haven't met you yet, welcome, welcome. And yeah, once you are physically comfortable, it's then easier for your mind and your heart to connect. And really what we remember is not always just mind. You know how you can remember, you can forget what somebody said, but you'll always remember how they made you feel. And so that's why this series has been about mind, mood. And now we're looking more around the physical body and metabolism. And we're going to chat a bit about exercise and serotonin and sleep and the practical things around digestion and eating. So without further ado, I am going to share the first slide and I've done the welcome. So I'm going to hand right over to Amanda.
Thank you, my dear. So you need to, there we go. Yeah, just to get rolling here. So interesting for us is, even though we work together for so many years, one of us always has to change the slides here. So we'll be queuing as we go along here. But what we wanted to focus on today, this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, was this third in this trifecta of topics around midlife. And where we're focusing today is on metabolism. And really the question is, or the focus is, are your genes, or maybe we should say, Celine, is your lifestyle sabotaging your metabolism in middle age or during this midlife sacred passage? And how do you know that, and what can you do about it? So on that note, we know that midlife can bring metabolic changes regardless of our gender. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of there's a lot of focus on us as women and not as much on men, but they also do go through andropause or midlife changes and can experience similar things to women. So midlife can bring metabolic changes, and those hormonal shifts that we go through can influence a lot of things that many of us are experiencing or have experienced, such as sleep. That's one that comes out often the first. Changes in mood and anxiety, like suddenly, why do I feel anxious in the middle of the night? Or why suddenly I've driven my car down this road for the last 20 years, am I anxious? What is this strange feeling? Cravings, stress, our digestive issues, a change in digestion that we suddenly weren't aware of can creep up on us. And then these interesting changes in weight, despite the fact we're still doing what we were doing before, or we're working even harder at the same exercises. So midlife can bring metabolic changes. So I'm going to kick it off with a dance. And I think it's interesting, Celine, because you are a tango dancer. That is one of your dances. She's an amazing dancer, goes up and dances in London. And so,
I'm a wannabe tango dancer. I've really just started, but I am good at other dances. But thank you.
yeah, no, I remember you talking about tango. So I want to welcome you then to the serotonin, estrogen or estrogen tango, because estrogen or estrogen and serotonin, we're going to visit again here very, very shortly, do dance together. And estrogen or estrogen is important for increasing serotonin. You might say, well, why are you so interested in serotonin when a lot of things that occur in midlife we can actually change back, we can actually route them back to changes in this estrogen and serotonin relationship. Serotonin regulates a lot of things, such as appetite, motility in the gut, and very importantly, serotonin has this intricate relationship with sleep. So it's a dance. But what happens is in midlife, next slide, Celine, is the music can suddenly stop. And then, wait a minute, do you remember musical chairs? Like the music will stop as kids or as adults, and you're the one left without the chair. Well, it's very similar situation with estrogen. As estrogen declines, that beautiful relationship or harmony we had with serotonin actually stops too. And that's what I want to unpack my part through the science. I'm going to keep unpacking these pieces because some of what we're experiencing is this change. The music just stopped. So let's look and see how the music stopped, Celine, and go back and look at something I showed you before. What stopped the music? And where I'm going to go in this first little segment is when that music stopped, how does that impact our sleep? Many things impact our sleep. It's not just serotonin. But what I want to show you, and Celine, you can kind of point along with me, is I never shy away from the science. So here's the science. And what you're actually looking at is basically a ladder or a molecular ladder or sequence that shows you how the body builds serotonin. So we start with tryptophan. And if this sounds similar to you, I talked about it in mood. And I'm going to push you back, and so will Celine, to go re-listen to what we talked about in mood, because we talked about tryptophan a lot. So tryptophan is a starter molecule to produce serotonin. So it goes through like a way station. Tryptophan is converted to that molecule 5-HTP, and then that gets converted to serotonin. So we've got these molecular steps, if you will. On the left-hand side, what you see in purple are the supporters. We call them the cofactors. They are what tryptophan needs or what your body needs to produce that intermediary molecule, 5-HTP. And then again, do you see on the left-hand side in purple, the molecules the body needs to make serotonin? So what is very important is vitamin D. We always associate it with the immune system, but can you see how important vitamin D is to make serotonin? It's important for all our brain hormones. That's number one. Number two, right at the top of the ladder, right under tryptophan, do you see estrogen or estrogen? This is a British company, so it is spelled slightly differently. It's the same molecule. In other words, estrogen or estrogen is a kickstarter to produce serotonin. Okay. On the right hand side, we have the genes. I'm not going to go into those. Other than that VDR gene, that stands for the vitamin D receptor. So you can't make serotonin without estrogen. It's a kickstarter. It's fuel. It's gasoline, if you will, and vitamin D, iron, etc. There's a lot of molecules involved. So then you say, well, okay, what's that got to do with sleep? Final slide for me here, Celine. What it has to do with sleep is if you keep following the ladder all the way down, you can see there's a couple more steps between serotonin, goes to another turnstile or way station, and you'll have these slides, so you'll be able to see this. And right at the end, you see melatonin. And so melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, it rises during the day and it declines at night. Hold on to that thought. That's what it's supposed to do. That's our sleep hormone. So if you have a hard time making serotonin, you have a hard time making melatonin, which is what helps us drift off to sleep. So we have to align this ladder. That's one of the things. And if you're missing a key fuel, which does decline in middle age, then that's part of the challenge. Where our hormones are declining, progesterone is declining, estrogen, which is so key here, we're losing that ability to create something that's natural to the body. The last thing I want to show you here, and it's such an aha for us, is that melatonin all the way at the bottom. See right next to it, it says MTNR, 1B. That's the R stands for receptor. So what we're looking at here is a melatonin receptor. What we now know with a number of different people, you don't have to be female or male, that when you have a gene variant on that receptor, automatically your melatonin levels can be higher. They're supposed to go lower in the morning. So quite a few people get up with higher melatonin levels. They can feel a little groggy. But what melatonin is supposed to do is suppress insulin. So keep your blood sugars regulated overnight so your body can clean up. It's something called autophagy. But if you wake up and you have this gene variant, you may automatically wake up with higher blood sugars. When we have higher blood sugars, they got to go somewhere. And it's often, if we don't burn it off, it's called into our fat stores. So there's this connection all the way through from estrogen to serotonin to producing melatonin, which helps us sleep. And some people have this irregularity where their blood sugars are higher, and they may have been higher overnight, all night. There's something we do about that, which I'm not going to talk about here, but it's something that we've learned in science, which is fascinating. So we actually change up the diet a little bit for people with that gene variant. So estrogen is important to sleep. Let me hand it back to you, Celine.
Super. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's why when we speak about midlife, it's impossible to just isolate one particular dimension. And that ties into our surprise at the end. And that's why the first session that we did in the series of 3 masterclasses, I don't know who attended that class that was here. If you did, perhaps raise your hand if your camera's on, or pop a yes into the chat. But the first session that we did, which really took a look at how to stay mentally clear and have focus. And Amanda spoke a lot through the genetic pathways there. And I also did a whole section on sleep. So I'm not going to go into the detail now, but what I wanted to do is highlight that the framework that I use that works really well, not just for me, but for thousands of people that I've had the privilege to work with, is this concept of taking the seasons and overlapping them onto a 24-hour day. So the season of spring would metaphorically be your morning as you wake up. And like Amanda said, when we wake up in the morning, we can sometimes feel groggy, and then often we reach for coffee, or we might look for some kind of fuel, some kind of breakfast, but actually it's not serving us because our glucose levels are high. And I'm going to share with you one of the key things we should all be considering, because the research is so compelling, that what you do in the first hour of waking can then help you at the end of the day, which is after you've gone through summer, which is your season of work. Then the fall is where you're winding down into then winter, which is the time that you're lying in bed, your head on the pillow, and you want to fall asleep and have a good night's rest. And in order for the most important season here around sleep is winter, but winter is impacted by the 3 seasons before, and specifically spring. So in the morning, when you wake up in the morning, and this is, if you're interested in this, there's quite a few podcasts now, but there's one in particular. It's about 2.5 hours long, by Andrew Huberman, who is doing a lot of research with the sleep expert Matt Walker. And they cannot stop going on about the importance of exposing ourselves, our eyes, the retina, to natural light in the morning. And I know it's really difficult, right? Or perhaps not in South Africa for people like Alison at the moment, but for us it is, it's dark in the morning. So as soon as you can, get your eyes, even if you stand in a doorway and you look ideally towards the east. So in the morning, we know the sun rises in the east. Look towards the east. If you can see a horizon, even better, because that really has beneficial impacts on your neurochemistry. What we know about the light, even if it's cloudy and overcast, the natural light that comes on, rather than being in bed with a cup of coffee on your phone, then immediately at your desk in front of your laptop. The natural light affects the photochemoreceptors that are right behind the optic nerve and on the brain, and that has an impact on the awakening response. It helps to regulate adenosine and some of the neurochemicals and neurotransmitters that Amanda's mentioned. It lowers cortisol in a healthy way so that you get the right mix and you get your melatonin circadian rhythm coming back into balance. I remember when Amanda in 2021 asked me if I was honestly getting natural light in the morning. And I said, yeah, sure. I live in a loft apartment. And I remember, Amanda, you said, no, I don't think that's enough. And I started going outside for 10 minutes with my cup of tea, and it revolutionized my ability to fall asleep at night. So, natural light, and if you can combine that, this is called habit stacking. When you're doing something, add another habit or activity if you can, then you really maximize it. So, gentle movement. It can be a few stretches. You can do jumping jacks if you're staying on the spot. If you can go for a walk, maybe you're taking your dog out for a walk if you have a beautiful fur child. But natural light and movement before you have coffee. So the ideal is to try and postpone caffeine intake for 60 to 90 minutes so that your natural biorhythm and circadian rhythm and neurotransmitters can find their balance. That can really help a lot. And if you are not getting enough sleep, and for whatever reason, it may be a time in your life, you might have a young child, you may have work commitments, you just can't get more sleep. And if you can't see natural light, so facing east in the morning and also getting outdoors just before sunset and looking west. And of course, when you look at the sun, I don't want you to look directly at the sun. You don't want to damage your eyes, but you want to get in that natural light. So you don't want to wear sunglasses, for instance. You want to let the natural UV rays come through. I'm curious if anybody on the call, and if you are, please just pop a thumbs up or yes into the chat. If you are using or have tried a protocol called NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. Its more ancient name is called Yoga Nidra, but of course, Yoga Nidra, I work a lot in the corporate space, and Yoga Nidra is far too much like candles and sandals. Nobody pays attention. NSDR, people are like, oh, it's a protocol. Then they pay attention. So once again, I've already mentioned Andrew Huberman, but there's many others that have validated that non-sleep deep rest can be very powerful. You follow it. It's a guided meditation. There are many available on YouTube free of charge. So it's a zero cost. Ideally, you should do more than 10 minutes, but no more than 20 minutes. It's a bit like having a power nap. And it's a visualization that takes you through different body parts. And it shifts your brain waves from beta brainwave, which is quite busy and alert, sometimes stressful, to slower alpha, maybe even theta brain waves. And it can give your brain almost a reset. And Andrew Huberman and Matt Walker are busy doing research right now to validate if NSDR is as good as actually having sleep. He's optimistic. Either way, it's beneficial. So those were two things that I didn't really emphasize in the Mind Masterclass, but I did talk a lot about other aspects around sleep. And with the follow-up note from today, we will include the recordings to the previous two, so it can be easy for you to go back and look at them. Thank you. So now from moving from the mind, we're going to move into talking about mood.
Something we're all so familiar with, right? And so what we know when we look at mood through the lens of genes is we can start to discover why some people, regardless of their life stage, can have some challenges with mood. But here we go back to our diagram. It's the serotonin and melatonin diagram. If any of you are curious what you're looking at here, it's actually part of a genetic report from a company in the UK called Life Code. And we like them because they have really nice diagrams. So even if we know nothing about science, we can at least follow along a little bit. So I take you back to our diagram. We went all the way down straight down the ladder, right? From tryptophan, and we ended up in serotonin. But now what we're interested in is we get to serotonin, and this is the part we're interested in when we're looking at mood, because serotonin, one of its roles is to create that all is well feeling, that, like somebody's giving you a hug and all is well in life. So it's completely different from dopamine that we met before, where dopamine is your risk and reward focus hormone. Serotonin is all about mood. And when we have aberrations with serotonin, when the production of serotonin or how the body handles it gets out of kilter, that's where we can feel like one moment we're anxious, the next moment we're depressed. You're like, what is happening to me? Number one is to make serotonin, you have to have all the food aligned up, as you can see, and the hormones to kickstart the production of serotonin. So part of that change in anxiety or self-confidence that we may feel in these transitional years is because our production of serotonin is wonky or it's not consistent, particularly as you're going through perimenopause, where one day you're up and the next day you're down. It's like Project Runway. One day you're on and one day you're in and one day you're out, right? So the other thing that you want to look at here, and I tried to break it down really simply, is you got a bunch of genes involved. And so what I said on the left-hand side is what is affecting serotonin is if you don't have enough chefs to produce serotonin, we talked about that. If you don't have enough of those nutrients or hormones involved to help you produce serotonin, that's going to be something that's going to create like a spinning top that's kind of not spinning in round or like a planet. If you don't have enough antennas to receive the signals, so Celine, right to the right of serotonin, there's two, whoops, there it is. There's two genes there. It's called HTR1A and 2. Those are serotonin receptors. What they do is they receive the signal from serotonin and they blast it out. Right, that's its job. So if you don't have enough serotonin to signal, or if you have some issues with genes where that signal gets scrambled, regardless of where you are in life, then the body's not getting the all is well signal. You can see in midlife that signal can get stymied because you don't have enough information coming through. And so you start to feel like, why am I anxious? Why am I moody? What has changed? Number 3, and I love this, if you have cleanup crews that are really, really efficient at getting rid of serotonin from the brain, the body always works in balance. It receives the signal. It says, do I need that signal? Or do I need to get rid of the debris from sending that signal? So if you go down to the right there and just circle those 2 genes, ALDH2 and MAOA, they are 2 genes that are really important to break down serotonin. If they break it down really fast, you're looking around for serotonin, your body's saying, what happened? What happened? If it breaks it down slowly, you can have very high levels of serotonin. That's where you feel that moodiness too. So it's a body is always looking in balance, but genes can get in the way in how they are actually firing the signal for you or breaking it down. And finally, you've got a recycling plant. We go back to serotonin to the left, where it says SLC1A1. That's the gene we also look at. What that gene's doing is it's acting in the neurons in the brain, and it's sending a signal that is out, and then it's saying, come back in, serotonin, come back in. We need you. We're not going to recycle you. Come back in. And if there's a faulty switch there, once again, the signal to produce serotonin is scrambled. So the mood that we feel and the mood changes in midlife, part of them can be our genes. That's what I look at is the genetics. So let me make those signals stronger or get rid of the signal. But so much of it is about hormones. And do you have enough food information on board to send a signal? And so I'm going to hand it back to you, Celine. And this is what I explained in this slide. Like if you don't have enough signal, how you feel can be scrambled. All right, back to you.
By the way, Amanda, I loved your choice of image for the slide. I didn't tell you, but I thought it was
Oh, yeah.
because we all understand how important signals are to get data and information and the right communication around the world. So I love that. So the second masterclass was all around managing our mood. And I'm going to touch on, because there was quite a lot that we shared there, specifically around vagal tone and understanding how to stimulate the vagus nerve, because that helps the parasympathetic nervous system, which is around feeling more like you're in paradise. That's how I always remember para. Rest and digestion happen at its best. And then we spoke through quite a few techniques using heart coherence. And I'll reinforce 1 or 2 of those in a moment. For now, I wanted to highlight when it comes to mood, and especially going through perimenopause myself, I've had to really cultivate a lot of compassion, because I will wake up and feel reasonably good. And then between then and looking outside and doing a few stretches and making my first cup of coffee, I can feel infuriated. And then an hour later, I can feel incredibly sad and cry when somebody shares something pretty reasonable. So these waves of emotions are beautiful. And the whole idea around emotions and mood is to stay compassionate and open and to welcome them. You know, there's a beautiful poem by Rumi called The Guest House, about inviting emotions into our home as guests, and we never know what they might teach us. However, today we live in a society where often we don't have space to express our emotions. And what we know is that what we suppress will get expressed, and in unhealthy ways. It can even affect potentially our genetic expression. So I know that two of the books I highlighted in the masterclass on mood was The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. So really incredible books that speak about this link between the emotion and physical health and how we need to process emotion. So how do we do that? How do we not suppress these emotions? Well, I have a love for Japan, and I went to Japan last year, and I got to spend time with a kintsugi master. And kintsugi is the art form where if a container or a ceramic item or glass item is broken, instead of being thrown away, it gets put back together with gold lacquer. And because it's been put back together in a very specialized way, it takes months for this process to be done. The object that is now broken and fixed is esteemed of higher value than the original artifact. So it's a beautiful illustration of how in our brokenness, we can be esteemed of higher value. And so for me, these techniques that I'm going to share with you, things like movement and using the breath, are like that gold lacquer. They make us more valuable when we use them. So it's not that we're broken that we need to use them. It's incredibly wonderful to have lots of tools in your toolkit in terms of managing ourselves, especially when we go through these rites of passage like midlife. So exercise of any kind, and the more variety you have and the more joy it brings you, the better. So I know Amanda, for instance, cycles and skis and walks, and I don't know if you still run, but you used to run, and you do a lot of PT, and you do qigong, energy work, and same as me, I do dancing, sometimes I do stretching, sometimes I do walking. It's important to do a variety and enjoy it. And then the breath is an underrated tool. I'm starting to work more and more with the breath in my workshops, because the breath is a very gentle, non-invasive way to help the body process emotions and even process trauma. So I have a breath coach that I see once every 6 to 8 weeks. And she's really invaluable as part of my support network. Then the idea of connection is going to come up again when we talk about food, social connection, having it might seem obvious to those of us that are on the call, but there are lots of people that are isolated and lonely and don't have connection. Then we also know that shifting emotion can also work through thankfulness, gratitude practices, joy spotting. And if you can, have a good belly laugh, or even just pretend to smile by lifting the corners of your mouth. You can do that now. It's a wonderful Buddhist approach to meditation where you just let the corners of your mouth lift up. And often within minutes, we start feeling happier. And then also releasing emotions in safe ways, like I use music to shift my emotion, to work through sorrow or grief. I throw safe tantrums or pillow fight or, scream into my hands. And these are techniques that a lot of indigenous tribes use and that we see in the shamanic world, but we've kind of left that behind. But now they're starting to become more popular, like sound therapy with music, for instance, and people going for gong bars and using energy healing. And I think it's wonderful. We need to be able to find what's going to work for us. And as we age, as we live longer, new things might bring new outcomes. So I always say, don't take our word for it. Always try something for yourself. And your body has this innate intelligence. It'll let you know. We just often don't sit with it long enough to try these different techniques and approaches. And creative expression is also a beautiful way, and that can be a whole range of things, from actual art to preparing a meal for the family, but to bring in some creative outlet can help. And on that note, talking about preparing meals, Amanda's going to chat to us a bit about how sometimes we crave things that we desire but maybe don't need.
Yeah. I think that comes with us through life, right? It's not just at midlife. There's cravings and stops along the way. I wanted to ask you something really quickly, Celine, because but we both of our heritage is French. But I remember being in Paris many years ago, and you're in out of Paris a lot. But in the Luxembourg Gardens or the Jardin de Luxembourg, at any given time you can actually go there and people are practicing Tai Chi. It's amazing. Like they'll just like in public. And I wanted to ask you if you've seen that there, or even in New York, I've seen it. But when you were in Japan, um, did you
Yes,
notice that? Just people will just, it's such a
I did. It's just
great.
it's a natural thing. Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't see it in Tokyo, but I saw it in rural Japan, between in Kyoto in the parks as well. And it's such a, I think in terms of helping the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, it's something that as Westerners we could look into and right. And Amanda and I have exchanged, it doesn't have to be an hour long. In fact, Amanda, the two you've shared with me are 6 or 7 minutes.
Mhm.
And I tap the nests, and it's the way now I start my day. I'm facing east, looking at the sunrise, or pretending that it's there, because in the UK, it's often there's a mile of cloud between me and the sun, but it's there, and my intentions are good. And I'm tapping, or I'm doing, and it's and tea is brewing. So it feels as if when we start stacking these into our routine, these little techniques, they don't need to take extra time because we don't want to add to the level of stress that we might be feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you hear us talk a lot about this energy work because it is, and when I end my piece today, I'm going to make it very clear that so much of what we're dealing metabolically in these midlife transition years has to do with stress, and it doesn't matter what we do. And so Qigong or Tai Chi, I think that they're linked, right? But Qigong, it's very interesting to watch practitioners. A lot of people, practitioners who are doing acupuncture or a massage, for example, will use Qigong, and one of the movements they do, and I can't remember what it's called, but they will just take their hands over their head and they'll just this rapid movement down, right? Alison recognized it. And you just like, you raise your heels and you just like stamp, right? And it's like this, it's like bloodletting, but it's energy letting, and so it's movement and it's breath, and it is very, very powerful. I'll do it too. Like when you want to scream, like, and you do this, and it's like a sharp outlet of breath. But maybe I'll find a video to show you that. But it is really useful for us when we just like, So anyway, on that note, so that what's the craving piece? Not everyone goes through craving. And what it has to do is very simply that the craving is what we would call serotonin hunger a lot of times. Sometimes it's to feed emotional wellness. Well, guess what? Or emotional balance. Well, guess what? Serotonin does, it helps bring that feeling good, emotional stability, emotional grounding. And so what the body is often doing is saying, give me the building blocks so I can make serotonin. And so those of us in the United States right now, it's always a big laugh around Thanksgiving. It's like, oh yeah, we eat turkey, I'm going to be sleepy because it's full of tryptophan. Well, the reality is there's plenty of other foods that are full of tryptophan that help you make serotonin, and they're not turkey. And what we really find is what the body is doing when it's craving something, it's craving carbohydrates, because carbohydrates, when you ingest them, they solicit the response from insulin, which helps metabolize carbohydrates, number one. But when you eat carbohydrates and you solicit or release insulin, the brain will actually, or the insulin will stop the uptake of other amino acids or building blocks that would prevent the body from making serotonin. In other words, insulin is instrumental to helping your body block the competitive protein building blocks to allow tryptophan in, to allow your body to build serotonin. So what you'll see, I'm asking their parents. So the kid's always in the refrigerator going after the carbs. Say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's why I know that the issue with the child is generally not a dopamine issue, it's serotonin. They're craving the carbs to try and find balance. And inadvertently, that is what's also happening with us in midlife, because we're looking for the starter fuel to make serotonin because the estrogen's missing. So if you experience the craving, it's the body saying, give me what I need to create serotonin so I can nourish my emotional well-being. On that note, Celine, and actually just the next slide, you've seen this before. Show me the food. So on the left-hand side, I'm showing here's all the nutrients we need to build serotonin, and these are the best of best foods. So it's really, we don't need to memorize the foods necessarily unless we're looking to help you make serotonin. Sometimes with women and men, I'm trying to prevent them from making serotonin because they make too much and they get too loud a signal. So we actually manipulate this, but these are the serotonin building block foods. And now you know where the cravings are coming from. Celine.
Amanda, quick question. What about taking supplements like 5-HTP? Because a lot of people...
Yeah, and so I know we have some practitioners among us, and we were looking at this recently. So if you go, we don't need to go back to it, but if you look at how serotonin's built, the rate limiting step, or the step we need to get into the brain first, is tryptophan. Okay. And so that's the first step. You can take the supplement 5-HTP as well, but then you're missing out on the food, right? The food is the first foray. 5-HTP can already cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's already inside the brain to help you produce serotonin. So part of the fight is, how do you get that information across the blood-brain barrier so you can start to produce serotonin? And if you have a lot of competitive foods or competitive building blocks, they're called large neutral amino acids, they will prevent tryptophan from getting into the brain. So what we're trying to do is get rid of them to get tryptophan into the brain. But sometimes we'll jumpstart that with 5-HTP. I don't with individuals because I try to want to use food. I think the other thing that's worth mentioning here, Celine, if it's okay, because we will talk about the gut as part of the conversation, is we have two genes that help us produce serotonin. One of them is very much is in the brain, tryptophan hydroxylase, but the other one is in the gut. So 90%, right, of the serotonin we produce is in the gut, but the serotonin that's produced in the gut cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. It does not help you produce serotonin in the brain. It's completely separate action. That serotonin in the gut actually interacts with the vagus nerve. Right. And I know you're going to pick up on that. That was Celine, but it's completely different. So when we have a lot of anxiety and stress, I'll make this point, which happens in midlife, like it's like the bricks kind of start to fall down, and like maybe we're empty nesters, or maybe something's happening with our kids or grandkids, and it causes a lot of stress for us. That can alter the makeup of the bacteria in the gut. And if you don't have the serotonin producing bacteria, you're not getting the activation of the soothing interaction of serotonin in the gut and its impact on the vagus nerve. Celine, you're going to talk about that, right? I think. If not, I'll come back and talk about
yeah,
that.
we can add into that. Yeah, for sure.
So, pretty much how do we enhance serotonin? There are supplemental strategies, right? Don't use them very often because we're not trying to treat just serotonin. So we're very careful with supplementation. Very much 100% diet focused, but we're also focused very much on these lifestyle interventions. Hence, what Celine was talking about, and so much of that is related to the gut and the brain connection, right? The gut, what happens in the gut impacts the brain. What happens between the two of them is connected by the vagus nerve. And off you go, Celine. Let me hand that back to you.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, it's I don't know if you've noticed, but with Amanda and I, we're weaving together because metabolism is such a I don't want to say complex, but it's a big topic, right? And it's got sometimes to do with movement, and it's got sometimes to do with stress, and sometimes to do with food. So we're giving you a little bit of everything. So it's a little bit of a mini buffet, and then we'll share the additional ingredient as a surprise at the end for the buffet. But when it comes to cravings, for me, the most important thing when I was in clinical practice and I'd work with my clients one-on-one, and we would do food records, what was more important to me was not what they ate, but it was when and why. So if you are having cravings, it's interesting, yes, to know, is it something sweet? And at what time of the days are you having something sweet? Like I recently worked with a Kate Waters. Thank you, Amanda, because I had some bladder concerns. She's an excellent nutritionist and dietitian for intimate parts. And she really helped me because I thought it was normal that every night I felt like something sweet and I wouldn't go over the top, but I'd always have a bit of chocolate or a bit of something. And she was like, well, no, that's a pattern. Don't just accept that. And then we linked that back to potentially the fact that I wasn't eating breakfast early enough and having enough fat for breakfast. And now it's true. It's like magic. On the days that I have fat for breakfast, I'm not craving the chocolate in the evening. So, keeping a bit of a record and then showing it to somebody else, because even if you are a clinician, I mean, I'm a dietitian and I didn't pick that up. And there's a lot that Amanda continues to help me with, because, when you're in the forest, you can't always see all the trees. So look for patterns, like what are you wanting to eat and when? And then really important to ask yourself why. And what I use is the acronym HALT, HALT. I don't do this every time. I don't want you to think I'm a purist by any stretch of the imagination, but I'll ask, am I really hungry? And the answer to that is only yes if I'm hungry enough to eat a green apple. I don't like green apples. So I need to ask myself, would I eat a Granny Smith right now? And if it's yes, then I'm hungry. Then go ahead, eat whatever I want to eat. And then the A is, am I angry? So once again, is there an emotion that you're wanting to, because often with the jaw and the stress response, fight or flight starts here in the neck and the jaw. And I, for instance, like to put stuff in my mouth. It's like mouth entertainment, but it's a distraction to the fact that don't want to speak or speak out or express what it is that I need to say. And the L is, are you lonely? So that's maybe a more softer emotion that could be related to the stress response when we collapse and we're tired and we freeze. So are you looking for nurturing and companionship? And food can be like that, And then the T's, are you tired? Because maybe you're having a blood sugar fluctuation, which was my case because of not eating breakfast early enough, because I was doing the intermittent fasting. And I don't think intermittent fasting is right for everyone, especially not going through menopause. But that's maybe a different conversation for another day. Ultimately, though, if you find that you are eating foods that you don't want to be eating, I usually say to people, are you doing the do's? Let's not focus on the don'ts, because that's where diets come from. And diets are terrible. The first three letters of the word diet tell you what they're about. We don't want to focus on don't have the sugar, don't have the fat, don't do that. But rather, are you having all the nutrients that you need? Are you eating those tryptophan containing foods so that you can boost your serotonin? Are you looking after your gut? Do the do's so that you don't need to worry so much about the don'ts. And then be curious about where, when, and what the patterns are, and potentially the emotions around the foods that you may be considered a craving. And then ultimately, when it comes to metabolism, I like to look at it through the lens of your fork, so everything that you eat, your feet, that means how you move your body, because that will boost your metabolism or not if you sit for too long. Just this week, I did a post on sitting is the new smoking, how it can be so easy to sit for longer than an hour at a time. And we really need to be taking exercise snacks, which is like a 1 or 2 minute boost in exercise where you get up, shift your metabolism, maybe take a few deep breaths, get some oxygen going to your brain, and then sit down feeling better. And you're less likely to then feel like crisps or chocolate or another coffee. And then your feelings are also involved. So this is where the stress component comes from. And we'll end off with that. What I'd like to do now is speak more about the fork. So, of course, what you eat is important. And the main focus that I think Amanda and I want to bring across is focusing on gut-friendly foods. And Amanda has so many resources on her website around how to do that. The way that I approach it is I've got this plate model in my mind wherever I go, and I travel a lot. I always put the color on my plate first. I try and eat as much of a variety of color as possible so I can get exposure to all those nutrients that maybe my biochemical pathways need. I know from my own testing that I need cruciferous and allium vegetables, so I make an effort to eat more of those. And then the other part of the plate is the proteins and then the right slow releasing, high fiber, low glycemic index carbohydrates. But no matter what you're eating, you could be eating a beautifully balanced meal, or you could be snacking on a packet of crisps or eating a bag of Maltesers. How you eat is also important. What I mean by that is we can just wolf down food and not taste it, or we can enjoy that chocolate so much that we actually struggle to finish it because we've really smelt it, looked at it, felt the temperature change as it starts to melt and cover parts of our tongue, and then the aftertaste. I do this with champagne, perhaps not with chocolate, but I appreciate wine and champagne. I can't drink a lot. I don't want to drink a lot. And so I really try and be mindful and present and pick up, is there brioche and caramel? And I try and, live into my archetypal sommelier, which I might have been in another life. But really being slow, 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 slow. We rush so much. And Amanda and I have already mentioned 2 destinations. So I'm sure you picked that up. And if not, here they are. So what do Japan and Paris have in common with your metabolism? Anybody have an idea? Anybody have an idea? Anybody might be into Japanese approach of eating. And so in Japan, let's start with Japan. It's one of the longevity hotspots, right? So Amanda, in Okinawa, we have a high concentration of people that are living healthy and well for a few reasons. One of the things they do around the way that they eat is they eat in community. So like the Sardinians, I know the Sardinians that's another longevity hotspot. They have an expression where they ask each other in the morning, not who did you eat. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. Not what did you eat, but who did you eat with? So it's more important the companion that they had than what they ate for dinner. I love that. Love that. So in Japan, there's lots of things that contribute towards this, but the main principle I wanted to highlight, it's called hara hachibu. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it means to eat until you are 80% full. So not 10 out of 10. And most of us, like if we think of Thanksgiving, Amanda, I imagine a lot of people ate until they were 15 out of 10 full. So this idea of going slower, so chewing our food well, eating maybe out of smaller plates and giving smaller portions. And the French do something quite similar. The other thing that the French do is meals become rituals. Now, my family in France, and whenever I go to Paris, everyone sits down at the table and there are no phones and there's no TV screens on, and the meal is sacrosanct. So that is something I think that should become more important the more stressed we are, because we're more likely to be eating fast and be driven by the sympathetic nervous system. So to sit down, use a knife and fork, don't have our phones nearby, don't be distracted. And if we can, have social connection and slow down, slow down. So that helps enormously when it comes to managing our food and helping to support our metabolism. But of course, it's not just about our fork, it's also about our feet. So Amanda, do you want to weigh in a bit here?
I do, Celine, but I don't want you to stop talking. I just continue on that table conversation with the French. Well, she is French. Was she French American who wrote the fantastic book? What's her name?
Mireille Guiliano. She wrote the book Why French Women Don't Get Fat.
And it's not an in your face book. It's a very ritualistic. It's a beautiful walk through French life. So you might want to write that in the write her name if you've got that, Celine, in the chat. But we both love that book, and I absolutely have to say, my parents now live in Spain, but my stepfather is French, so it's just fun to chat with Celine's mom, or like sometimes a lot of times when we leave messages to each other, we're actually leaving them in French, which is really cute. But I will actually say it is so true that when we're eating with our parents, eating is a ritual, not a ritual. Oh my gosh, everyone be quiet. It's like, it is a coming together. It's a celebration of food, to the extent that my mother will say, oh, no sooner we sat down to one meal, Amanda, and we're talking about the next. It is so French, right?
Yeah. And also something that she speaks a lot about in the book. I'm going to add it to the follow-up note. That's a great recommendation. Her name and the name of her book. She also speaks about how French women don't see food as good and bad. So if they have a chocolate mousse, they've had a chocolate mousse. They've indulged in the chocolate mousse. It's not like they feel guilty, because negative emotions like guilt can often drive addictive like behaviors and make us feel like, oh, well, it's Friday night. I've had the chocolate mousse. I might as well just wait till Monday. And so
yeah, it's a very different
yeah.
mindset, but I think it is critical that they start with the table. And having worked in France with a couple of children's programs. In one of the school districts, the children all eat together. The teachers eat with the children. The older children serve the younger children, and the youngest children learn to eat with a knife and fork. It is incredible. I'll see if I can find some of the photos and post them. But anyway, Celine, let's get on to the last part that we're going to talk about. And some of this is going to segue into our surprise. So I may kind of shorten this up a little bit, Celine, and then pick it up again in our surprise. And so one of the things that some people experience as they transition through midlife is weight gain. And I have to say, because I work with a lot of midlife men and women, and they are really struggling with that extra, role, and say, well, where did this come from? And I'm working so hard and I'm at the gym. And what I see, particularly women, is we just say, right, I'm not who I was before, and so I'm going to hit the gym even harder. And they are there 1 or 2 hours a day, and they say it makes no difference to what's happening to me. And here's one of the major reasons why, is if your genes look a certain way, then you exercising and sweating and doing all the things and all the climbing is not going to make any difference, because exercise is a form of stress to your body. And that is really important. So what I'm trying to show you, two things. Obviously, I'm looking at genetics. On the left-hand side, this is a different report that we use here in the US and South Africa, actually, Allison, so it's a South African company, is in this recovery section. You're like, what am I looking at with these genes? Well, at least 5 of those genes are what we call gain of function genes. It means that they are locked and loaded. And if you stress them, they're going to turn around and activate an immune response, an inflammatory response for you. Excess inflammation in the body is not associated with weight loss, it's associated with weight gain. It's an immune activation response. Therefore, what we're seeing when we're working with it's more with women who are working harder and harder and harder. And they have genes that look like this. One of the first things we have to do is back off the exercise or change the exercise so it works in conjunction with their genes, because they're working against them. When we pull the gas out of the exercise conversation and reconstruct that or rebuild that, they lose weight or they reorganize their weight, because exercise becomes a stress. So cannot emphasize how important that is. Okay, so on the next piece here, so, and then because we're working our hardest, doing all the things, right, that we're supposed to do, we're moving and we're controlling our emotions, but it's actually not working. Then we're losing our hormones too, and we're not sleeping. We stress even more. And what happens when we stress even more is our genes don't like stress. Next slide here, Celine. And that's what I'm trying to say here. Many genes don't like stress. They don't. The one on the right-hand side, TNF alpha, is a master switch in our immune system. Many people have this gene. It's very readily activated. Its job is to solicit or activate an immune response. Its job is to tell the immune system, something's wrong, something's invasive. Put out everything you got in the immune system. And when we look at labs in this case, we can see complete disruption in the immune system. Some genes don't like stress. The other one on the left-hand side, ADRB2, is the adrenergic receptor. When you activate that, its job is to actually dump fat in the bloodstream. But when you consistently and continuously stress that gene, it becomes deaf. And then you don't get the effect of dumping energy in the bloodstream, and your body starts to look for energy in different places. So let me try and put that together, because it's a really important point that in our surprise, I want to unpack this more slowly for you. So let me try and put this together for you. I've got a scale here. On the left-hand side, you have acute stress. That is like when something happens, the kid's in the ER, something's happened to your partner, what have you. It's like, oh my gosh, let me jump in the car and deal with it. That's okay. Your body says, activate your fight or flight hormones, activate cortisol, give me all the energy I can to get to where I need to go. I think most of us are familiar with that. The flip side is chronic stress, which these genes receive the same way. They don't know the difference between whether it's an emergency or whether you're having a bad day. Chronic stress is completely different. What happens with chronic stress is your cortisol levels are consistently activated. They're consistently high. This is what's happening to us in a very stressed, difficult world right now. We're all on alert. Our cortisol levels are high. When our cortisol levels are high, they're supposed to hit a receptor, a glucocorticoid receptor. That itself will then dump blood sugar into the bloodstream, so you get that response. But when you have elevated cortisol, its job is actually to shut down the immune system, so all your reserves can go into fleeing from where you're going. But if you are constantly stressed, cortisol still talks to those glucocorticoid receptors, but they can't get the signal. So then you don't have an anti-inflammatory effect. You have a pro-inflammatory situation. So chronic stress activates the immune system. It doesn't deactivate it. If you have genes that are readily fanned and to cause stress or to activate stress, to activate the immune system, this is where you start to see people develop autoimmune associated issues, and yet they've been healthy all their life. It goes all the way back to cortisol. Last thing I'll mention here, when we have high levels of cortisol, they actually cortisol can regulate insulin, but when it's very high all the time, you don't get an insulin response. Insulin starts to say, nah, we don't care. Yeah, so then you have elevated levels of insulin. What does insulin do? It stores sugars and fats as fat. It's a fat storage hormone. Stress equals fat storage, not fat reduction over the long term. So there's all these connections. The craving piece, and I'll end here and hand back to you, Celine, is elevated levels of insulin that are associated with chronic stress. Also, I was about to lose a receptor. They'll actually silence something called leptin. Leptin is your cue to stop eating. So it actually puts a stop to that and says, you're still hungry. You're still hungry. You're still hungry. So what I'm trying to connect here is stress, cortisol, autoimmune response, fat storage, not fat loss, and changes in your satiety signal. So guess what? The craving is actually not coming from willpower. It's coming all the way back to stress. Celine, let me hand it back to you. Oh, that's right. I forgot the grumpy cat.
And that's why, we actually found that as we were preparing for this, there was so much, and already we're at time. There's so much that we want to share with you. So we are going to do another masterclass, Metabolism Part 2, on that's the surprise, by the way. Ta-da! We'll send out the link so that you can register again. But if you wanted to put it into your diary, February the 4th. I can't remember the time. Well, I know my time, but we'll send it out. Yeah. So we can just build on some of these concepts and just explore more around the genes, because there is a lot to share, a lot. And the key message around stress is that stress is going to happen all the time. The stress response happens involuntarily. We need to practice how to relax. And here is our third destination. In the previous masterclasses, I spoke about how what happens in your vagus nerve doesn't stay there, which is a good thing. It impacts your entire system. So for instance, when your gut is healthy and you're producing that 90% of the serotonin that then positively impacts your vagus nerve, that has a huge impact on rest, digest, proper immune function, correct genetic expression. And so we need to become Jedis in understanding our own vagus nerve and how we can stimulate that so that it can cause and bring in this deep relaxation. If you haven't listened to the mood masterclass, I spoke a lot about heart coherence and heart-based breathing and how that can help. And there were 5 other techniques like humming and cold water exposure, even just on your face, and using music. So feel free to take a look, because this is what we've done this over the past 3 months. Amanda and I have done a mind masterclass, mood, and then today's metabolism. Turns out it's metabolism part 1. and we will do metabolism part 2. So I'm always conscious of ending when we say we will, but we will not jump off straight away. So thank you so much for being here. And I saw a lot of you taking notes, those that had your cameras on. And if you have any questions and you need to go, you're welcome to email us when you get the thank you note, or you're welcome to stay around for a short while and have a chat with us. But thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Alison. Enjoy dinner.
Yeah, I forgot the grumpy cat picture was, so and the point, yeah, it was such a good picture. I mean, the point there really was that in spite of it all, some of us do have grumpy genes, and it has nothing to do with midlife. Our metabolism is a reflection of how we built, and based on how we built, we will actually work a little bit differently with exercise, metabolism, food, etc. And so Celine and I said, this deserves its own attention. What happens if you got the grumpy genes, like the grumpy cat? Is all bets are not off. It's just recognizing you have grumpy genes. So we'll work with the grumpy genes. So
thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much for the gratitude from everybody. We'll thank you when you put some of these things into action, or just stay curious. Just stay curious about the beautiful intricacies of your body and mind and mood and metabolism. Yeah. Because if all the stuff was easy, we would all be doing it. It's not, in fact, Amanda, I just said to you the other day that I think it's time for me to have another session with you, just to make sure, look at all my supplements, my food, some of the tests.
yeah.
Just to be
and
sure.
we change too. I mean, we do change, things when we're looking at genes like in your 30s, or it's not that the genes change, it's maybe, it's not even how they're expressing, it's how we're experiencing how they're working changes in life, and we're not so worried about serotonin signals in our 30s, but when we don't get, because we have all the hormones on board, right? But when we lose that impetus, it changes. And I think it's really important that we recognize that for women and
I also think, Amanda, that I'm just thinking, because when I had that really good session with you in 21, it's now been 3 years. I mean, I feel much better now than I did then. So I'm grateful. I must be doing stuff right. But I think when we get into our 40s and 50s, should we not be doing these health checks? I think even every year or couple of years, not waiting a decade.
I mean, yeah, but we can do routine checks, right? It doesn't have to be advanced metabolics or anything. But I think, for me, one of the most important things that we can do as women, but also men, and which I think you did recently, is get a Dutch test, because that test is so integral to understanding your cortisol, how you're managing cortisol. That's major, right? But also how you're, handling hormones, because and even when I think earlier in life, particularly with women, but it can be men too, but women may, for whatever reason, want to take birth control. And understanding how you metabolize these different hormones, which is what they are, is really, really important. Whether you've got them, whether you want to reintroduce them, or whether you don't want them, I think that's a very important test for midlife.
I agree. Yeah.
Particularly for men and women. When you lose those hormones, like we all lose the hormones, we're losing an impetus for bone metabolism as well, and that is critical. It's not just about hormones, but I think the Dutch test is a highly useful test. It's a mirror of you. So
Well, there's a question that perhaps, Amanda, you might be good at responding, about having to go to the bathroom and urinate before a stressful event. I mean, I know the stress pathway, why that happens, because when we're in a stressful situation and the body is under threat, it doesn't want to carry extra urine. And even sometimes you can, in very stressful situations, you release your bowels. So it's a way of making the body lighter so that you can fight or flight effectively. So it's a normal response. I would actually, sorry, I passed on to you, Amanda, and I just started talking and replying.
But no, it's fine. I mean, that's how I would look at it. The only thing, if it's always for a stressful event, I I could understand that, Celine, but if it's outside of a stressful event and persistent, then that's probably possibly a microbiome associated issue.
But if it is just with the stressful event, then perhaps really, really deep diaphragmatic breathing to help keep, so much so that the diaphragm massages the colon. And so the whole digestive system and lower abdomen can feel the message of calm. Because if you're slowly and deeply breathing, you cannot be anxious at the same time. So
that's also where Qigong's useful too, because it's breath work, but you're moving. So, some people have a hard time with just, breath work, right? It's like, okay, I'm doing this. I don't know if I can do this, or a meditation. But Qigong too, it's like that movement, right? We do a lot of diaphragmatic work through Tai Chi or Qigong, which would parallel with that, Celine, when you can bring in the breath work too. So I agree with you.
And sometimes we think we're breathing correctly, but there's a basic, what they call the book test, where you lie on your back and you put a reasonably heavy book on your lower belly, and then you breathe in and you need to lift the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember when I first did that, I was like, I can breathe properly, I'm fine. And I couldn't do that properly. So that was one of the things that my breath coach got me to work on. And sometimes we only use the front of the breathing thoracic cavity as opposed to the sides and the back. So learning to open up your whole your chest cavity. And all this is to help the diaphragm to be able to push down, and then that stimulates the vagus nerve. So I would recommend that you explore how to maybe ensure that you're helping that lower part of your abdomen get the message of I'm calm through deep diaphragmatic breathing.
I think also, and this may be more your space than me, because you talked about heart rate variability, being able to monitor that, to being aware of your heart rate, and really starting to hone in on that, I think would be very, very insightful, because you may find triggers, that are like the middle of the night or something. So,
and then learning how to go into heart coherence, because the more you practice that, the easier it gets to drop into what we call a healthy HRV. Yeah. And I'm just reading the comment. Thank you, Michelle.
wow.
That's wonderful awareness. Yeah. I mean, a lot of us, men tend to also carry stress in their glutes. That's more of apparently a masculine stress response, but most of us, it's the top here. It's the jaw and the neck and the shoulders. I think it's wonderful, wonderful that you're getting some treatment for that, and that you're realizing, just because we don't know what we don't know, if we've been stressed a lot and we've never actually relaxed. It's only once we relax that we realize, wow, that's how much stress I was holding. Yeah, so stay compassionate and kind as you explore that even further. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Says our shoulders are like earrings. So true, Michelle. So true. Yeah.
I think I'm going to stop the recording, Amanda, because I don't want the recording to look like it's too long.
Yeah, absolutely.